All right, everyone, welcome back. So it is time for our Round 3 Western Conference Finals preview. We got the final two teams here of the Western Conference, and it is between the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers. So these are two very talented offensive teams that have good defensive capabilities and have good goaltending as well. This can make up for another really good series here in the third round. Additionally, too, one thing I want to point out is that the Stars have not won a Stanley Cup since 1999, and the Oilers have not won a Stanley Cup since 1990. So, amongst these teams, if they beat either the Rangers or the Panthers in the finals, one of these teams will be breaking a drought that is over 20 years long. So, impressive. Regardless, starting off here with team stats, we'll start with the Dallas Stars. They went 52-21-9 for 113 points in the regular season. They were second in the NHL. They beat the Vegas Golden Knights in 7 games, and they beat the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games. So, one thing that we know Dallas can do is play from behind. They can play a lot of series and games, too, from behind. Now, there is some consistency issues with blowing leads against Colorado. That is something you definitely don't want to do against the Oilers with their top-end talent. But I do think the way they handled Vegas was solid, and they even went down 1-0 against Colorado, and they still came back, won 3 straight, lost another one, but then they won it in a double overtime following that. So they are a team that is good offensively. They're deep, too. That's the biggest thing. A lot of their guys listed here have at least one goal. I think there's only 5 players on the current roster who have played at least one playoff game that don't have a goal. So it's a short list. And a lot of guys have contributed offensively for this team. That's a huge thing. You look at a lot of these teams here, there's not a whole lot of depth going around. Now, there is some depth on some teams, like the Panthers are very deep. The Rangers have some depth. The Oilers have depth. But Dallas, I would say, is probably the deepest team amongst the 4 remaining in the playoffs right now. So, looking here in terms of the Oilers, however, the Oilers went 49-27-6 for 104 points. They were 9th in the NHL, and they beat the LA Kings in 5 games and the Vancouver Canucks in 7 games. So, they very easily handled LA, very easily handled them, and that was not close whatsoever. Vancouver was closer because I thought the Oilers played okay defensively, but one thing they lacked was playing a full 60-minute hockey game. There were plenty of games in that second round series where they played really well the first 2 periods, then they crumbled in the third. There have been at least 2 or 3 games that have done that to them. Like, I think Game 1 was a big example of that. I think Game 3 that happened to them as well. Game 4, too, and I think even Game 5. Like, they have just crumbled in a lot of the games in this series. But in Game 6 and 7, even though 7 was a little bit they still showed when they play a full 60-minute game, they can win the game. So that's the biggest thing with the Oilers there. And I understand there's going to be that criticism against Stuart Skinner. We'll get into that in a second. But regardless, let's start off with the Dallas Stars leading scorers. So it's actually led by Miro Heiskanen. Defensive Miro Heiskanen leads the playoffs in scoring. He had 9 goals, 45 assists for 54 points in the regular season. He has 5 goals, 8 assists for 13 points in the playoffs. Heiskanen's probably the best defenseman on this Dallas roster, one of the best left in the playoffs. Is a guy who can rely on for that on and off goal. And I think Heiskanen has contributed well offensively. That's something you need. You need defensemen to contribute offensively. And the Oilers had that too. We'll get into that in a second as well. Jason Robertson, 29 goals, 51 assists, 80 points. He had 3 goals, 9 assists for 12 points in the playoffs so far. So Robertson's scoring has been limited a little bit. He hasn't been scoring a lot as you'd think as he's been on this playoff run. It's been a lot of the secondary scorers. One thing you're going to realize, it's been a lot of the guys who have scored secondary goals. That's huge for Dallas. And if they're going to win this series, that's what's going to propel them over the Oilers for sure, is their depth scoring. I'm going to say that a lot in this video. Wyatt Johnston. I made a list on my Instagram talking about the best playoff performances I've watched from players. Johnston's top 10 on that list. He has 32 goals, 33 assists for 65 points in the regular season. He had 7 goals, 4 assists for 11 points in the Stanley Cup playoffs this past season. He's been impressive. He had 2 goals in the Game 7s last year, looked superb in those games. And even in this year's playoffs, kind of defeated Vegas, did good against Colorado. I mean, he's had himself one hell of a run. If Edmonton wants to win this series, Johnston's a guy they want to watch out for because he's young and he's very talented. Fourth in scoring, Jamie Benn. Benn with 21 goals, 39 assists for 60 points in the regular season. He had 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points in the playoffs so far. I think Benn, when it comes to playoffs, he's not a great regular season scorer, but in the playoffs, he's a guy who can really show up and score that clutch goal for you. He scored plenty of goals in this series. And then Tyler Seguin is 5th in scoring with 25 goals, 27 assists for 52 points. He has also 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points in the playoffs. Seguin looking to get back at another Stanley Cup. Won the Stanley Cup with Boston in 2011. It's been a long time since then. And I think Seguin could be a guy that you could watch out for there for some good, middle depth scoring. Other guys that I think have contributed for this Dallas Stars team, Evgeny Dadonov, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. I think Dadonov's been a very talented forward, especially in these playoffs and his time with the Stars. Stankoven, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, was a rookie, came up, played a few games this year. I think he's still actually eligible to be a rookie next season, but he's come up in the playoffs, has scored some goals. It's impressive. You want to see younger players and guys that you don't really know too well, don't have a lot of experience, score goals. That's something that Dallas has had. Again, as I said, they have had, I think, 16 of their 21 guys they played in the playoffs so far. They have scored a goal, at least 1 goal. So that's something that's impressive there. Roope Hintz, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. Hintz's playoff run's been a little bit disappointing. He looked like a ghost against Vegas. He kind of turned it up a little bit against Colorado. I think that if you're going to beat the Oilers, you're going to need Hintz to show up. That's one of the biggest things. That was a concern that I did have early on in the playoffs with him and Pavelski. We'll get into in a second. But I do think that problem's kind of resolved itself here a little bit. Matt Duchene, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. Duchene's had a great playoff run as well. I think when they brought him in, he was probably, again, one of the best acquisitions of last year's free agency, and is a guy that you can rely on for some good secondary scoring and makes himself a good middle 6 player. And additionally, too, he scored the game winner in Game 6 to advance Dallas to the conference finals as it is. So, impressive there. And then finally, Joe Pavelski. Pavelski with 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. Pavelski's numbers have been concerning, but it's not too surprising. He's a little bit older than other players. It doesn't surprise me that he's kind of struggling a little bit here. But Pavelski, I do hope that if they're going to win, they're going to need him to show up a little bit more and get some more production. I hope that does happen from the Stars overall. A look at the Oilers now. The Oilers have a lot more top-end talent when you look in terms of just on-paper numbers. You got Leon Draisaitl leading the way with 41 goals, 65 assists for 106 points. He has 8 goals, 16 assists for 24 points in the playoffs. One thing I noticed with Draisaitl is he's great in the regular season, no question there, but it feels like he's another level in the playoffs. Even in previous years where they've lost in the second round, where they've lost in conference finals, it's just, Draisaitl seems to just turn a different gear in the playoffs, and he's just insane. It's unbelievable. Someone who has been not bad, but a little bit underwhelming is Connor McDavid. McDavid with 32 goals, 100 assists for 132 points. He got 2 goals, 19 assists for 21 points there in the playoffs so far. A lot of those points are secondary assists and power play points. So that is something that I've seen there. A lot of teams are really focusing on trying to neutralize Connor McDavid. And I think that if Dallas is going to win this series, they need to obviously neutralize those 2 players, and McDavid and Draisaitl. I think once you do that, it becomes a little bit more easier, but there's still guys on this team that can score. I'm going to go through these numbers here. There are still plenty of players on this team that can score a hefty amount of goals. So it's not something to be messed with there. They're not a 2-player team anymore. They're not a 2-player team. Evan Bouchard, 3rd in scoring here, 18 goals, 64 assists for 82 points. He has 5 goals, 15 assists for 20 points in the playoffs this season. I think Bouchard, he has the most points through 2 rounds as a defenseman in NHL history. That's insane. And the fact that it's that low is kind of strange to me. I feel like it'd be way higher with some of the high-scoring defensemen we've seen in previous seasons. But I guess, hey, new modern era adds for a lot of more scoring. I think Bouchard has played good defensively in this series too, and it's one thing I want to keep in mind. A lot of the guys on this board that I mentioned, like McDavid and Draisaitl, especially in Game 7, they played way more defensive. They were blocking shots. They were playing a more defensive-minded type game. If you're going to win, you're going to need your guys to play both sides of the rink. And I think the Oilers have done that through the first 2 rounds. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins here, 18 goals, 49 assists, 67 points in the regular season, has 4 goals, 12 assists for 16 points in the playoffs. Nooch, I think he's been good. He's scored the on and off goal, been a good passer in these playoffs. And then finally, Zach Hyman. Hyman with 54 goals, 23 assists for 77 points in the regular season. He has 11 goals, 2 assists for 13 points in the playoffs. So that's another guy you want to watch out for there too. Hyman is on a whole nother level when it comes to scoring this year. He just seems to be just an unbelievable player for Edmonton down the stretch here, and 11 goals in the first 2 rounds is, I think, a team high. I think it might even be a league high currently in the playoffs. He might lead the playoffs in goals. He's been spectacular. In terms of other guys in this team, Evander Kane, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points. Gives you the on and off goal, a good physical guy. Matthias Ekholm, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. Dylan Holloway, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points. Brett Kulak, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. And then Cody Ceci with 2 goals, 1 assist, and 3 points. So overall, when you're comparing depth, I'd say Dallas is more depth than the Oilers. That's undeniable. I think a lot of the more guys in Edmonton, they're not offensive, but they play a lot more of a defensive-minded game, which is a bigger thing that Edmonton's been kind of promoting a lot over recent years, especially with the goalie situation. That's the biggest thing you look at when you think of the Oilers. Oh, what's the goalies looking like? So let's get into that now. So starting off here with Jake Oettinger. Oettinger with an 8-5 record, a 2.09 and a .918. Here's the thing with the goalies. They've both been inconsistent. Oettinger's numbers are good, but he's been inconsistent. He'll have games where he looks good, but he'll have games where he looks terrible. So if Dallas wants to beat the Oilers in this series, they're going to need to have Oettinger stay consistent. Because there were games in the first round where he looked terrible, horrendous, let in like 4 goals on 15 shots. There were games in the round 2 where he looked terrible, let in 4 goals on 25 shots. So it's something that the Stars are going to need to control there. Oettinger's going to need to control. I think that they can absolutely they can beat the Oilers if Oettinger's on his game, but if not, it can become a little bit more challenging, especially with the more offensive players on this roster. Stuart Skinner for the Oilers, 7-3, a 2.87 and a .881, and I'll mention Calvin Pickard here too, a 1-1 record, a 2.21 and a .915. So this is a concern that's been here for years. I remember even dating back to when Mike Smith was in town, Mikko Koskinen, even like Cam Talbot. I remember Oilers goaltending was the biggest criticism of recent years, and I understand why. Listen, a .881 is the lowest save percentage I've seen a goalie have heading into the third round. It's one of the lowest ones I've seen. But I do think that the Oilers have played way better defensively in some games than they have previously. And I think that that's why Skinner's numbers aren't great. That seems a little bit strange. But he's letting a lot of goals on lesser shots. So that's something you got to keep in mind there too. I think when Pickard came in and played those 2 games, I thought he did well. I thought in Game 4 he looked great. Game 5 he played well, but wasn't his fault. It was smart, though, to go back to Skinner in game 6 and 7. So a lot smarter there from the Oilers, and I think Noel Block's done a good job at that. But again, this is a very fun offensive-minded series. I don't expect for this to be like I don't think it's going to be like a blowout every game, but I don't think it's going to be a lot of those low scoring either. I think we're going to see a lot of high scoring affairs here, at least in the first 4 games of this series. So stay tuned for that. I am really looking forward to this series. It's probably one of my most hyped up series I have looking forward to in recent years. If I had to predict, I'm going to say I said Stars in 6. I'm leaning Stars in 7 now. I think the Oilers push it to 6 or 7. I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on the Oilers a little bit. Kind of people are like underrating them. And I think that that's going to come to bite people in the butt. They underrated them against Vancouver. Look what happened. You could argue that, McDavid, Draisaitl carried them. They outplayed Vancouver the majority of that series. So that's something you got to keep in mind there too. But regardless, I'm literally looking forward to this series. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed me, like, subscribe down below. I really appreciate it. We have the East preview, which is up right now. If you want to go check that out, it's uploaded on the channel. Just go check it out. But regardless, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.